Well, hello, you guys. I'm here to talk to you guys about anatomy and physiology for speech and hearing, chapter 9. We're going to be focusing on the anatomy of hearing. I'm going to break this lecture up into two sections. We'll talk about the outer and middle ear, and then in the next section for this same lecture, I'll talk about the outer ear. So here are all of the links that are going to be embedded within the PowerPoint. We're just going to get to anatomy of hearing on this video. On the next one, you'll be able to look at those links for the inner ear. So this is just a general video that goes over gross anatomy of the ear. So go ahead and take a moment. You can even pause this video and pull up that link on your PowerPoint just to get you oriented. It kind of gives you a better three-dimensional view. It's a gentleman just going over a model. So I think it is really a nice overview. All right, to begin, we're going to talk about what most of us think of as our ear, which is our outer ear, what we all have seen and grown up and learned about. Another name for that outer ear is the pinna or the auricle. And the pinna has several different structures that comprise it. So the first one is the helix, and here's the helix here. Okay. And then we have the tragus, and you guys go ahead and get a mirror and really check this out to see your tragus. Some people have pierced this. It's not common, but some people do pierce their tragus. Your lobule. The lobule does not have any cartilage, whereas the rest of your auricle is comprised of cartilage. So you'll notice on your cranial skull that the whole outer ear is gone because that's cartilage and not bone. And then we have our external auditory meatus. We also call that our concha, or we can call it our external auditory canal, but that's this guy right here. And you can see part of that on your cranial skull. Okay? And if you headed through the external auditory canal, you would then, here's another picture of, here's your auricle here. Here's the external auditory canal. And then here's the tympanic membrane, or the eardrum, there in white. Okay? So here's a blown up picture of that tympanic membrane. If we're going to go back just to remind you, here's your eardrum. We also call it the tympanic membrane. So this is a lateral view looking directly at it. So if you took an otoscope and looked in a patient's ear, this is what you're looking for. So we'll go superior to inferior. The superior aspect is the pars flaccida, and it does look rather flaccid compared to this part of the tympanic membrane. Okay. Then you're also going to see the malleus. It's actually the manubrium of the malleus, and we're going to learn about the gross anatomy of the malleus. But part of the malleus is embedded within the tympanic membrane, and the malleus is a tiny little bone that articulates with one other bone to create this chain within the middle ear to send sensory information, essentially sound pressure changes that enters the middle ear and then travels on to the inner ear and then to our brain. So it just helps transfer that information. So we'll talk about that, sort of a mechanical process. And then at the very tip here, you'll find the umbo and then the cone of light, which it is actually a really bright white. It's just a shinier part of the tympanic membrane. All right, so I alluded to talking about the ossicles, and there are three of them. So we have the manubrium that we just talked about. Then we have the incus, and then we have the stapes, which is this one right here. We'll learn about the different parts of each one, but I just remember malleus, incus, stapes as an MIS, and it's lateral to medial. So here's the tympanic membrane. Remember, the manubrium of the malleus is embedded within it. So malleus, incus, stapes, and I think MIS, miss, as in, oh, I missed what you were saying. And that really does kind of help me remember Malleus, Incus, Stapes. All right, so to begin, we're going to talk about the Malleus. So I've rotated the orientation on you. So now this is lateral over here. So the manubrium would be articulating or be embedded within the tympanic membrane. So so here's your Malleus. This is the manubrium of the Malleus. Okay. Here's the head of the Malleus. And the head of the Malleus articulates with the Incus. Okay. And together they form the malleoincoidal joint, which is right here. The next ossicle that we get a visit about is the incus. So that's that middle ossicle. And ossicles are tiny, tiny bones. They're actually the smallest bones in your body. So they're pretty cute and fun to learn about. So to begin, we have the head, we have the body, sorry, of incus articulating with the head of malleus. Okay, so here's the corpus or the body. And then we have a process called the lenticular process. And I don't have a great way of remembering lenticular. So if anybody has a good one, go ahead and post it under tips, and I'll be sure to share it with everybody. So there's the lenticular process, and that articulates with the stapes that we're going to talk about in a minute. So another word for malleus, which is this bone here, is it means hammer, and then stapes means stirrup. So if that, and it kind of does look like a stirrup when we start to look at it, if that helps you guys remember the two. All right. So we have the head of stapes, and then the foot plate. Okay. So the head, of course, articulates with the lenticular process of incus, and then the foot plate is attached to the oval window, and we're going to learn about the oval window in just a little while. But remember, it's kind of an oval shaped bone. Well, that part, the foot plate is oval shaped, and if that helps you remember that it's got to fit into the oval window, it might help you remember, because there's an oval window and a round window, and sometimes they're easy to confuse. So remember, the foot plate is embedded or attaches to the the foot plate attaches to the oval window, and then is held in place by this annular ligament. Sorry, let me get back to where I was. All right. So I just kind of want to lay it out for you guys in a way, lateral to medial. So if you want to start at the tympanic membrane, it goes tympanic membrane, malleus, incus, stapes, oval window. Okay, and that's basically how the sound travels through the middle ear, from the tympanic membrane to the malleus to the incus to the stapes to the oval window. And the oval window opens up into the inner ear and displaces fluid in the inner ear, which then sets off a series of things that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So if we want to break it down even a little bit farther, so here's the outer ear in red, and then the middle ear in black. So we have the auricle, it's also called the pinna. And remember, there's a few different things you need to know about the auricle. So different structures. External auditory meatus, which is just that opening to the tympanic membrane. And then we have the manubrium of the malleus, head of the malleus, corpus of the incus, lenticular process, head of stapes, footplate of stapes, and then oval window of the temporal bone. Okay, and remember that the inner ear is housed within the temporal bone, the petrous portion of the temporal bone. So you should be able to put that together. So now we're not on the outside of the skull anymore. We're now inside of the skull. Okay. All right. So now we're going to learn about a few muscles. There's only two that help kind of mediate how much sound travels through to the inner ear. So just like any other muscle that you've learned, you need to know the name, location, category, and function. And the two muscles are the stapedius and tensor tympani. So here I've given you the origin and insertion. Origin is the posterior wall of the middle ear space. And in a little while, I'll show you, there's kind of a neat learning strategy where you break up the middle ear into a box, and you talk about it in terms of the posterior wall, the anterior wall, lateral wall, medial wall, superior wall, inferior wall. And then you kind of create a box like that, and then write out where each structure is located. It just really helps you learn it quite a bit more. So I'm going to have you guys do that as homework. But the stapedius here is, its origin is the posterior wall of the middle ear space on the temporal bone. And then insertion is on stapes, essentially. So you can see it right here. So here's stapes. Okay. So stapedius helps reduce the amount of vibration that travels through and actually displaces the fluid in the inner ear. So it will tense and kind of hold stapes, so it's not moving as much if the sound is too loud. So it helps mitigate some of that sound by stiffening the ossicular chain. All right, and then the second one is tensor tympani. You'll see it's a much larger muscle. Okay, so its origin is its origin is the greater wing of the sphenoid and part of the eustachian tube. So you actually only see the insertion here in this picture. Okay, and its insertion is on the manubrium of the malleus. Okay, and it also helps to stiffen that ossicular chain and reduce the amount of vibration that's sent through it. All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys about the medial wall, the posterior wall, in an overview, and then I'm going to have you guys do an assignment that I'll introduce for you here in just a little bit. That will help bring it all together. It's really kind of hard to talk about it this way. So if you feel like it's a little overwhelming right now, it is, but it'll be clear once you do this hands-on assignment. So here's the medial wall. Remember, this has to be the lateral wall, right? This is the tympanic membrane, okay? So the medial wall have three important structures that we're going to talk about. One is the oval window. And remember, the footplate of the stapes is embedded within the oval window, so you can't really see it, but here it is, okay? And then we have the round window, which is right here. Okay? And then we have the canal for tensor tympani. All right, so to continue talking about the medial wall, I had to bring up another picture. This is a canal for the lateral semicircular canals, which we'll learn about in just a little bit, but it's a part of the inner ear. So this is posterior, anterior, okay? This is medial. All right, so the anterior wall is the entrance for the eustachian tube. And the eustachian tube is right here, and it drains into it travels forward from the middle ear, and then kind of travels forward and medially, and will drain in your pharynx. Okay, so if you have fluid in your middle ear, it's eventually going to drain through here. Children, for example, their eustachian tube doesn't travel from superior to inferiorly. It's actually aligned more horizontally. So if they do get an ear or they get a cold or upper respiratory infection, their middle ear space can fill with fluid, and then because of this eustachian tube is kind of set up more horizontally rather than vertically, it can't drain well, so they're more likely to get ear infections. So that's why little kids often get ear infections, whereas adults rarely do. One of the reasons. They're also bigger too, and everything's just more compressed in terms of anatomy when you're looking at children. So there's just more and more likely to have that. All right. Okay, so the posterior wall and floor. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the pyramidal eminence, and it's really the tendon of the stapedius. Okay, so here it is. All right, and then we have the additus to the mastoid antrum. Okay, and we'll talk about the mastoid antrum in just a little bit. But do you guys remember your so it's basically just the opening to the mastoid antrum. So here's your mastoid process. Do you guys, so remember sternocleidomastoid, and you can actually palpate your mastoid process? Okay. So there's an opening basically in that middle ear to this mastoid antrum right here. And here's your mastoid process. And sometimes this can, if you have a chronic ear infection, sometimes this area can get infected and then infect the rest of this bone. And I do think I have a picture for you. It's not beautiful. Oh, I do. So we'll look at that in just a little bit. Okay, and then we have the mastoid air cells. So I talk about this a little bit. They're really, it's just very porous bone that can become infected if you do have a chronic ear infection, and that mastoid antrum fills with fluid, and then it's just something that your immune system's not taking care of. So you have to get a mastoidectomy, and you actually have to go in and clean out these mastoid air cells. So it is not a pretty thing. All right, so this is an example. You don't need to list all of the things here. The next slide will have the list of terms that you need on your guys' assignment. But this is kind of an example of what I want to see when you're, and you can even write the terms on your piece of paper if you want to, but for your guys' assignment. So here's a kind of a 3D version, and I mean, essentially just copy this. So I want to see tensor tympani. I want to see the PE tube, sorry, the pharyngotympanic tube here. I want to see the stapes with the oval window. I want to see where the semicircular canals come through, the additus, mastoid air cells. I want you to depict where those might be. And then I want to see the pyramid of the tendon of stapedius. And then on this medial or lateral wall, I want to see the tympanic membrane. So all of those that are listed here are plenty. There's more, but that's plenty for, you can add more too if you want to study. Once you add the eustachian tube too. So I'll, oh no, here it is, here. So you're fine. So here's I want you to print this page out just as a single slide and then use it to do that assignment. All right, so that's good for this video. I'm going to post the next video here on the inner ear.